The other night when we were recording the new 2002 CD, I said to Freda, who was sitting right by me, I said, "You started something big." And she said, "It is big, isn't it? God started it," she said. And that is the truth.
What God has accomplished through Freda Lindsay, she would give all the glory to the Lord. Yet because of her willingness to serve Him, He was able to use this ordinary woman to do extraordinary things. Her life is truly characterized by faithfulness throughout the years. This faithful heritage began even before her birth. In 1899, when Lenin's Russia was taking shape, Gottfried Schimpf, Freda's father, a Cossack in the Russian cavalry, decided he didn't want to raise his children in an atheistic Russia. So Gottfried, his first wife and children, along with 40 other Lutherans, sailed to Mexico and began a new start. After a devastating outbreak of malaria, most of the party died, including Gottfried's wife. Soon after this tremendous loss, Gottfried moved to Kansas with his motherless children, where he met Freda's mother, Katie Soklovsky, another Russian immigrant. Prior to Freda's birth, Gottfried learned that Canada was parceling out tracts of land in Saskatchewan and decided to settle there. On April 18, 1914, in a sod house on the frigid plains of Bristol, Saskatchewan, Canada, Freda Teresa Schimpf was born from humble beginnings. Yet Gottfried was an industrious fellow, and during World War I, the wheat market was favorable and the large wheat farm prospered, and they were able to build a 10-room farmhouse in the plains of Saskatchewan. Even though the farm was prospering and life was good, the severe 60-below winters were too much for Katie, and she prevailed on Gottfried to move to a warmer climate. Gottfried located an apple orchard in Oregon City, Oregon, and auctioned off the wheat farm and all their belongings and moved to Oregon. The economy after World War I was sadly slumping, and Gottfried found no market for his apples. Eventually, he ended up feeding most of his crop to the hogs. Because the farm in Canada and all its equipment was sold on credit, it was hard to collect the debt. After a year in Oregon City, the Schimpf family lost everything and ended up penniless. Even though the following years were filled with financial hardship, in hindsight, it was the providence of God. This hardship brought Gottfried in desperation to seek God more fervently. In Canada, the family had attended a Lutheran church, but in Oregon, they were exposed to the full gospel for the first time, and his faith took another dimension.
My father, I remember sitting by the hour reading his German Bible, and he would say, "Mother, you just got to listen to this. Listen to this verse I'm reading." And he'd read it to us kids in German.
As Gottfried cried out to God, the longing of his soul was fulfilled, and he was baptized in the Holy Spirit, along with many of his family members. The family finances dipped so low that the pastor of the church offered to adopt Freda to alleviate some of the burden. Freda's sister Elma remembers her mother's reaction.
"Oh my goodness sakes," she said, "there's no way I'd give up any of my children, no matter how tough the situation would be. No."
Although with 12 children this was a daunting task, Katie and Gottfried kept their family together. In the midst of this huge family, Freda's leadership qualities were formed at an early age.
Well, she always was sort of bossy. She was in command all the time. And, she just ordered us kids around, and we seemed to do what she told us to do. But she was a little older, and we respected her.
Gottfried, who was fluent in Russian, German, Spanish, and Polish, never mastered the English language. For this reason, the best employment he could secure was in the lumber mill, where he worked for $3.10 a day. This was not sufficient to feed the family, so while other children were taking summer vacation, Freda and her siblings were picking fruits and vegetables. At age 9, Freda remembers working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., working alongside her mother. Freda's father, being from the old school, did not believe in educating women. Freda, being a bright student and thirsty for knowledge, couldn't bear the thought of not going to high school. After pleading with her mother agreed to approach her father about letting her continue her high school education if Freda would find a job to pay for it. Freda had to work outside the home to pay for her high school education.
For a while there, she wasn't living at home because of working as a housekeeper in one of the Jewish homes. And she was going to school from there because it helped financially, and then she brought her money home to buy groceries for us kids.
During her last semester at Jefferson High School in Portland, Freda was granted a partial scholarship to the university of her choice. Unfortunately, she did not have the money for the other half of the tuition.
We all felt bad because they only gave 2 scholarships when she was going to Jefferson High, one to a boy and one to a girl. There was no way she could, because she was cleaning houses, and there was no way they had any money to send her to college.
As her friends went off to college in the fall, Freda, working as a domestic maid, became depressed and despondent. For this young lady with such potential, yet no resources, life seemed like it wasn't worth living. Dark thoughts began to haunt her. Freda went to church with her family, but hadn't yet given her life to the Lord. Helen recalls their worldly ways.
And Freda and I would be sitting kind of to the back, and we really thought we would like to get out of there. We didn't want to stay. The services were very long. Ever so often, whenever we could sneak out, well, we would go out and go down the street and go over and get a milkshake or something. But Freda wasn't interested in being a Christian at that time.
During this hopeless point in her life, her sister asked her to attend a service that a young evangelist, Gordon Lindsay, was conducting at their church. Having nothing better to do, she agreed to go. As the service drew to a close and the invitation to receive Christ was given, Freda, even though under tremendous conviction of the Holy Spirit, refrained from going to the altar out of pride. Everyone in the church knew she came from a Christian home, and she had fooled them into thinking she was a Christian too. But Freda knew better. After the dismissal prayer, she made her way to the altar and surrendered her life to Jesus and was gloriously saved. Unexpectedly, as Freda was kneeling at the altar, the Holy Spirit spoke to her that if she remained faithful, she would one day marry Gordon. Freda didn't just sit back and wait for Gordon to show up with an engagement ring and a bouquet of flowers. She faithfully prepared herself.
Immediately, she wanted to take Bible studies, and the church had them. So she began, and she went a long ways to come to those services because she lived a long ways from the church. And she came at a regular time. She didn't miss. She always wanted to be there and be studying and learning more about the Lord. So she had a complete change.
She enrolled in the Foursquare Bible School night classes, became active in church. Besides working full-time in the local department store and attending Bible school, Freda sang in the choir and eventually became the young people's leader.
She was in charge of all the young people. Huge bunch. Our room was just packed all the time. So she loved that part of it. She was a born leader.
Freda even ministered to the down and outers at the rescue mission.
I'd go down with her. Hobos there, a lot of old men, some few women. We always had good chaperones go with us, but I'd go along with her and listen to her preach.
Even with all that Freda was involved in with work and church activities, her frugality was evident.
You know, her family didn't have a lot of money. She would walk from Myron Frank's when she'd get off and to save 10 cents in fare to walk clear out to her house, which is probably 7 or 8, maybe 10 miles.
For 4 years after her conversion, the only time that Freda would see Gordon was once a year when he came home from his evangelistic work. Gordon's mother heard from the Lord, even though Gordon apparently hadn't.
Mother was very much interested in having Freda and Gordon to be married. And so when Gordon, he'd be out in the evangelistic field, and when he'd come home, and Mother would say, well, now you and Helen, you go down and see Freda worked at Myron Frank's, and you go down and invite her for dinner next Sunday. So to be sure that, that they had an opportunity to be together.
One such visit, Gordon showed up in the church with his 2 sisters. Immediately, young pretty girls wanting his attention surrounded him. Freda, purposing in her heart not to run after Gordon, ended up leaving after the service the back way in order to avoid Gordon altogether.